Me and my daughter-in-law stopped at the mall to grab some groceries. While I was paying for the steaks and beer, she stepped out to quickly make a call. As I walked out, an old security guard pulled me aside. "Sir, is that your daughter-in-law? Come with me. You need to see this with your own eyes." What I saw on those screens made my blood boil with rage. Their faces turned white as ghosts when the truth hit them, and now they're going to pay dearly for every single betrayal. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Everett Harrison. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Fort Worth, Texas. Spent 43 years working as a chief railroad engineer before retirement. I always believed that family was everything, that blood meant something. Funny how life has a way of teaching you bitter lessons when you least expect them. 5 years ago, I made what I thought was the most generous decision of my life. My son Brandon and his wife Danielle were struggling financially, scraping by in a cramped apartment, drowning in credit card debt. So I did what any loving father would do. I handed them my house. Not sold it to them, not rented it. I gave them my 3-bedroom home on Oakmont Drive, the place where Brandon grew up, where his mother and I had built our life together. The deal was simple. They'd save money, get back on their feet, and I'd stay in the guest room temporarily until they could afford their own place. That was 5 years ago. The guest room lasted exactly 3 months. Brandon used to be different. I remember him as a kid, waiting by the window every evening for me to come home from the rail yard, racing out to show me his latest drawings or some treasure he'd found. He'd wrap his arms around my legs and tell me about his day in that excited, breathless way only children can manage. When did that boy disappear? I know exactly when. The day he met Danielle Cooper at some corporate networking event. She walked into his life with her practiced smile and designer clothes, and my son walked out of mine. Danielle is 34, though she'd probably tell you she's 29 if you asked. She's got that polished look, the kind that comes from expensive salons and department store makeup counters. Dark hair, always perfectly styled. Nails always done. Wardrobe that costs more than my monthly pension. She works in marketing, or at least she says she does. I've never actually seen her go to an office, but she's always on her phone, always busy with something important that I wouldn't understand. The guest room arrangement ended when Danielle decided I was in the way. "Too much noise," she said. I got up too early. My clock repair hobby cluttered the house, so they converted the garage into a studio apartment for me. Insulation so thin I can hear every car that drives by, a space heater that barely works in winter, and a bathroom the size of a closet. But it's temporary, right? Just until they get ahead. That was 4 years ago. The house transformation happened gradually, like watching rust spread across metal. First, my furniture disappeared into storage. Then my photographs came down from the walls. Danielle redecorated in what she called modern minimalist, which apparently meant erasing every trace of the 35 years I'd lived there. My workshop became her yoga studio. My reading chair went to Goodwill. Even the kitchen, where my wife used to make Sunday dinners for the whole family, got gutted and rebuilt in sterile white and gray. "It's necessary updates," Danielle explained when I questioned it. "The house was stuck in the past, Everett. We're bringing it into this century." My wife's name was never mentioned. Her memory, like everything else, was cleared out to make room for Danielle's vision. The financial control came next. Danielle suggested I add her to my bank account for emergencies. Made sense at the time. I was getting older, living in their house. What if something happened and they needed to access funds for my care? So I signed the papers. That was 3 years ago. Now she has a debit card linked to my pension account. The money I spent 43 years earning, the railroad retirement I'd been counting on, flows through her perfectly manicured fingers like water. "We need to cover the mortgage, Everett," she'd say, even though there is no mortgage. I paid off the house in 2003. Property taxes have gone up. Utilities are expensive. You use the water and electricity too, you know. Brandon says nothing during these conversations. He stares at his plate, pushes food around with his fork, and changes the subject. My son, who once defended me when neighborhood kids said my work boots were ugly, now can't meet my eyes when his wife squeezes another few $100s from my account. This morning started like most others. I was in my garage workshop, repairing a 1924 Elgin pocket watch I'd picked up at an estate sale. The intricate gears and springs require steady hands and patience, two things I've cultivated over decades. The work calms me, lets me focus on something I can fix, something that follows logical rules and rewards careful attention. The door opened without a knock. Danielle stood there in her black coat, the expensive one she bought last month, with money she said was for household repairs. "Get your shoes on," she said. No greeting, no please. "We're going to the mall. I need you to help carry groceries." "I can give you money for delivery," I offered, not looking up from the watch mechanism. "I prefer to shop myself. I need to see the quality of what I'm buying." She tapped her foot, a sharp click against the concrete. "Come on, old man. I don't have all day." "Old man. She's been calling me that for the past year." Not Everett, not Dad, which I never expected her to say anyway. Old man, like I'm some burden she's tolerating out of the goodness of her heart. I set down my tools, cleaned my hands, and grabbed my jacket. In the car, she talked on her phone the entire drive to Ridgemar Mall, discussing some sale or promotion with a friend. I might as well have been furniture. The Kroger inside the mall was busy for a Thursday afternoon. Danielle grabbed a cart and started down the aisles with purpose, tossing items in without checking prices. Steaks, imported cheese, craft beer, organic vegetables, the kind of groceries that add up fast. I followed behind, silent, wondering again how my life had come to this. "I need to make a quick call," she said when we reached the checkout. "You pay for this. I'll be right outside." She handed me her shopping list and walked away, phone already at her ear. I unloaded the cart, watching the total climb. $67.43. I paid with my debit card, the one that's supposed to be for my personal expenses, and took the receipt. As I pushed the cart toward the exit, an elderly security guard stepped into my path. He had to be in his 70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read, Gerald Miller. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "That woman who was with you, the one in the black coat. She's your daughter-in-law?" I blinked, surprised. "Yes, she is." "Why?" Gerald glanced around, then leaned in closer. "Sir, I think you need to come with me. There's something you need to see with your own eyes." The way he said it, the gravity in his voice sent ice through my veins. "What are you talking about?" "Please." He gestured toward a door marked Security. "It'll only take a few minutes, but trust me, you need to see this." I looked toward the exit, where Danielle was still on her phone, pacing near the entrance. Then I looked back at Gerald's serious face. "All right," I said. "Show me." Gerald led me down a narrow hallway to a small room filled with monitors, the surveillance nerve center of the mall, screens showing every angle of every store. He sat down at the console and pulled up recorded footage. "I've been in law enforcement for 30 years before I retired," Gerald said, his fingers moving across the keyboard. "Worked as a detective in Dallas. You develop an eye for certain things. Watch this." The screen showed Kroger from 3 weeks ago. The timestamp read late afternoon. I watched Danielle enter alone, grab a small basket, and start shopping. She moved through the aisles casually, examining products, putting some in her basket. Normal shopping behavior. Then she turned down the meat aisle, glanced around, and reached into her black coat. The coat had seemed bulky before, but I'd never thought much about it. Now I understood why. She pulled out one side, revealing a deep interior pocket, and slipped 2 packages of premium steaks inside. Then she moved to the cheese section and did it again. A block of imported brie, a package of prosciutto. Into the coat, my stomach turned. "No," I whispered. "No," she wouldn't. "Keep watching," Gerald said grimly. He pulled up another video. Same store, different day. Danielle, same black coat. Same methodical theft. Cosmetics this time. Expensive face creams, serums, makeup. All disappearing into that coat while she maintained her shopping basket with a few cheap items. The kind you'd actually pay for to avoid suspicion. Gerald cycled through more footage. Different days, same pattern. Alcohol. More meat. Specialty cheeses. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. "We noticed this pattern about 2 months ago," Gerald explained, "but we couldn't identify who it was. The coat hid her face from certain angles, and she varied her schedule. Professional shoplifter behavior. Then today I saw her with you. I recognized her immediately. He pulled up a different screen. This one showed a Facebook marketplace group called Fort Worth Discount Deals, and there was Danielle's profile listing items for sale. Premium steaks at half retail price, imported cheese, high-end cosmetics, all the same products I'd just watched her steal. We estimate at least 15 incidents over the past 3 months just at this location, Gerald said. Based on what she's selling online, she's hitting other stores too. This is organized retail theft, sir. It's not shoplifting a candy bar. This is serious. The room felt like it was closing in. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Then another thought hit me, worse than the first. Wait, I said. When she shops here, how does she get in the door? You need a membership card for the discount entrance. Gerald's expression told me he'd been waiting for this question. He pulled up another video, this one from the entrance. Danielle swiped a card to enter. The screen zoomed in on her hand. I recognized that card. It was mine, the one she'd taken from my wallet a month ago, saying she needed it for family shopping trips, to get better prices. If security caught her, if police got involved, whose card would they trace? Not hers. Mine. My name, my membership, my card used to facilitate theft. I could be charged as an accessory. At 68 years old, I could face criminal charges for something I had no knowledge of. The police, I said, my voice hoarse. You need to call them. Report this. I can do that right now, Gerald said, reaching for his phone. We have everything documented. Wait. My mind was racing, trying to think through the implications. If Danielle got arrested, she'd claim I was involved. She'd say I knew, maybe even that I encouraged her. Brandon would believe her, would defend her. And the house, the money she'd drained from my account, all of it would be locked up in legal battles I couldn't afford to fight. Give me 24 hours, I said. I need to verify something first, something important. Gerald studied my face. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. 24 hours, but after that, this goes to the police, with or without you. Understood? Understood. I left the security office in a daze. Danielle was still outside, finally off her phone, looking impatient. I loaded the groceries into her car like nothing had happened. During the drive home, I stared out the window and thought about the past 5 years. There had been signs. Of course there had been signs. I'd just been too trusting, too willing to believe the best of people. The expensive purchases Danielle made while claiming to be broke. The designer handbags, the trips to Cancun, the jewelry, all on a salary she claimed barely covered her car payment. You're quiet, Danielle said, interrupting my thoughts. What's wrong with you? Just tired, I replied. When we got home, I carried the groceries inside and retreated to my garage. I needed to think, to plan. This wasn't just about theft anymore. This was about my entire life, my home, my future. That evening, Danielle and Brandon sat in the living room, my living room, discussing their plans. I could hear them clearly through the thin garage walls. Once your father finally dies, Danielle said casually, like she was discussing the weather, we can sell this place for at least $340,000, maybe more if we update the bathrooms. Danielle, don't talk like that, Brandon said weakly. Oh, please, he's 68. How much longer can he last? And why does he need a house this size anyway? It's wasteful. We could buy something bigger, maybe out in South Lake. Brandon said nothing. My son, who used to defend me against everything, said absolutely nothing. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by dismantled clocks and tools, and felt something shift inside me. The man who'd given up his house, his dignity, his peace, that man was done. Gerald's words echoed in my mind. 24 hours. I had 24 hours to verify something important. The next morning, I looked up attorneys in Fort Worth. I needed someone who specialized in property law, someone who could tell me exactly what legal ground I stood on. The name Patricia Stewart came up repeatedly in searches, with reviews praising her expertise in estate and property matters. I called her office and explained that I needed urgent consultation about property ownership. The receptionist heard something in my voice because she fit me in that same afternoon. Patricia Stewart's office was downtown on the 7th floor of a building I'd passed 1,000 times. She was in her late 50s, with gray-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. I told her everything. The house, the garage conversion, the financial control, the theft I'd discovered. I showed her the receipt from yesterday, explained about the membership card. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. "Mr. Harrison," she said when I finished, "let me ask you something crucial. When you gave your son the house 5 years ago, did you actually transfer the deed? Did you sign quit-claim papers or any transfer documents?" I tried to remember. Brandon said he'd handle the paperwork. He said he'd take care of it all, that I didn't need to worry about legal stuff. "But did you ever sign anything? At a notary's office with witnesses?" I thought back through 5 years of memories. Conversations about the transfer, promises that it would be done properly, but actual paperwork. "No," I said slowly. "I don't think I ever did." Patricia's expression changed. She turned to her computer and pulled up county property records. After a few minutes of searching, she looked up at me with something like amazement. "Mr. Harrison, I have good news. According to the official records, you still own the house. Your son never filed the transfer documents. Legally, he's simply a resident living in your property, with your permission." The words took a moment to sink in. "You're sure?" "Completely sure. The house is still in your name. You are the legal owner." I sat back in my chair, barely able to process this. All this time, Danielle had been planning to inherit and sell my house, and she didn't even have any legal claim to it. "There's more you should know," Patricia continued. "If you wanted to, you could establish a living trust and transfer the property into it. That would protect it from any future claims and give you complete control over what happens to it after your death." "Tell me more," I said. Over the next hour, Patricia outlined my options. A living trust would move the house out of my personal ownership and into a legal entity. I could be the trustee, controlling it completely during my lifetime, and I could specify exactly who would benefit from it after I died. "The trust could specify a charity," she said, "or a specific person, or no one at all. It's entirely up to you." I thought about Danielle's voice last night. Once your father finally dies. I thought about Brandon's silence. I thought about 5 years of degradation and control. "I want to set up the trust," I said, "and I want to make sure my son gets nothing." Patricia didn't judge. She simply nodded and pulled out the necessary forms. 3 days later, I sat in her office again, signing the final documents. The Harrison Family Heritage Fund now owned my house. I was the sole trustee. Upon my death, the property would go to Veterans Housing Alliance, a charity that provided homes for homeless veterans. Danielle and Brandon would inherit nothing. The documents were filed, notarized, and legally binding. Patricia handed me copies in a folder. "You understand this is irrevocable?" she said. "Once these documents are filed, you can't change the beneficiary." "I understand." As I walked out of her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Power, control, purpose, but the theft was still happening. Danielle was still stealing, still using my card, still putting me at legal risk. I needed to know the full scope of what she'd done. I found a private investigator named Marcus Bell, former police detective, now running his own firm. I hired him to track Danielle's activities, document everything, and find out exactly how deep this went. "Give me a week," Marcus said. "I'll get you answers." I went home to my garage workshop and picked up the Elgin pocket watch I'd been repairing. My hands were steady as I worked. For the first time in years, I was working on fixing something that mattered. My life. The drive home from Patricia's office felt different. The streets looked the same. The traffic lights cycled through their familiar patterns. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. For 5 years, I'd been living like a guest in my own house, apologizing for existing, shrinking myself to fit into corners they'd carved out for me. No more. That evening, I sat in my garage while Danielle and Brandon ate dinner in what used to be my dining room. The walls were thin enough that their voices carried clearly. I'd stopped trying not to listen. Why should I? They certainly never lowered their voices on my account. "We should start looking at houses in Southlake," Danielle said. Her tone was bright, excited, planning my funeral before I was dead. "There's a development with 4-bedroom colonials, pool, 2-car garage, the whole package. That's pretty far from my work, Brandon offered weakly. So you'll commute. It's worth it for the school district. When we have kids, I want them in the best schools. A pause, then she laughed. Your father will probably leave us enough that you won't need to work anyway. Think about it, Brandon. We could travel. Get that boat you've always wanted. Boat? My son had never mentioned wanting a boat in his entire life. But then again, this version of Brandon, the one who let his wife plan my estate before my body was cold, was a stranger to me. How much do you think the house is worth? Brandon asked. I had a realtor friend give me an estimate. $340,000, maybe more if we renovate the master bath first. We could net probably $250 after fees and taxes. I sat very still, listening to them divvy up my life savings, like children splitting candy. The watch mechanism in my hands required delicate work, but my fingers remained steady and cold. What about Dad? Brandon said finally. There was a long silence. I could picture Danielle's expression, that calculating look she got when solving problems. What about him? She said. He's 68, Brandon. How much longer do you think he'll last? Another year? 2? And honestly, the stress he puts on himself, working on those stupid clocks in that freezing garage, it's not doing him any favors. Not doing me any favors? As if she cared about my well-being. As if she hadn't spent years actively making my life worse. Danielle, that's kind of dark. It's realistic. Look, I'm not saying I want him to die. I'm just saying we need to plan for the inevitable. And when it happens, we need to be ready to move fast. Estate sales, paperwork, all of it. The faster we liquidate, the better. Liquidate. Like I was a failing business instead of a human being. I set down the watch and walked quietly to the small window that faced the backyard. Through it, I could see into the kitchen. Danielle was gesturing with her wine glass, her face animated. Brandon sat across from her, nodding slowly. My son, who used to bring me drawings from school, who'd asked me to teach him how to throw a baseball, who'd cried in my arms when his mother died. Now he nodded along while his wife planned my liquidation. The next morning I was up before dawn, old habits from railroad work, when shifts started at 4 a.m. I made coffee in my small kitchenette and waited. At 8, I called Marcus Bell's office. Marcus Bell ran a private investigation firm out of a second-floor office on Camp Bowie Boulevard. I'd found him through an internet search for Private Investigator, Fort Worth, reading through reviews until I found someone described as thorough, discreet, and honest. His secretary put me through immediately. Mr. Harrison, Marcus said. His voice was professional, neutral. What can I do for you? I explained the situation carefully. The theft, the videos Gerald had shown me, the Facebook marketplace. I told him I needed to know the full scope of what Danielle was doing. I can help with that, Marcus said, but I need to ask, why hire me? You already have evidence. The security guard could report this to police right now. Because I need to know everything, I said, not just what she's stealing. Everything. How long it's been happening, how much money she's made, what she's doing with it. I need a complete picture. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, You're building a case. I'm protecting myself. Fair enough. My rate is $150 per hour plus expenses. I'll need a retainer of $1,500. For something like this, figure a week of work, maybe 2. I did the math quickly. $3,000, give or take. A chunk of my monthly pension. But what was money compared to justice? When can you start? I asked. Today. We arranged for me to drop off the retainer that afternoon. I also gave him screenshots from the Facebook group that Gerald had helped me save to my phone, along with Danielle's personal information. After I hung up, I sat in my garage workshop and considered my next move. The house documents were secure. Marcus would investigate the theft, but I needed one more piece in place. I needed to understand exactly what I could do legally. Patricia Stewart's office had Saturday hours by appointment. I called and explained I needed to discuss estate planning in detail. She scheduled me for that afternoon, right after I met with Marcus. The day unfolded with mechanical precision. I drove to Marcus's office, a modest suite above a tax preparation service. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. I signed the contract, wrote the check, and handed over everything I had. "Give me a week," he said. "I'll have something for you." From there, I drove downtown to Patricia's office. She greeted me with coffee and a legal pad full of notes. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said. "The living trust protects the house, but what about your other assets? Your bank accounts, your pension, your personal property?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "What do you recommend?" "First, remove Danielle from your bank accounts immediately. You can do that online or in person at your bank. Second, we should discuss a comprehensive estate plan, not just for after your death, but for protecting yourself now." Over the next hour, Patricia walked me through options I hadn't known existed: power of attorney designations, healthcare directives, beneficiary assignments. Every detail mattered. Every form had consequences. The key, she said, is that you maintain complete control while you're alive, and after your death, everything goes exactly where you want it to go, not where someone else thinks it should go. By the time I left her office, I had a folder full of documents to review and a plan for our next meeting. My head buzzed with legal terminology, but underneath it all was a growing sense of certainty. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was taking back control. That evening, Danielle noticed my absence. "Where were you all day?" she demanded when I came back to the house. "Had some errands to run," I said mildly. "What kind of errands?" "You were gone for hours." I met her eyes and smiled slightly. "Personal business." Something flickered across her face. Suspicion? Worry? But she covered it quickly. "Well, next time, let us know." "We were concerned." No, they weren't. But it didn't matter what they thought anymore. I retreated to my garage and returned to the Elgin watch. The mechanism was almost complete now. All the tiny gears aligned, the springs tensioned correctly. Soon it would tick again, keeping perfect time. Just like my plan. A week passed in careful observation. I went about my routine, fixing watches in my garage, grocery shopping with my own money, staying out of Danielle and Brandon's way. But now I watched them differently, not with the resigned acceptance of a victim, but with the calculating eye of someone gathering intelligence. Danielle left the house every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, supposedly to meet friends. She'd dress nicely, take her black coat, even when the weather didn't call for it, and return 3 hours later with shopping bags from discount stores. Except the bags never seemed to contain much actual merchandise. I'd see her carry them to the bedroom, then emerge later with them empty, folded under her arm. On the following Thursday, I mentioned casually that I might go to the library. "Whatever," Danielle said, barely looking up from her phone. "We won't be here anyway. Brandon and I are going to look at furniture." Perfect. After they left, I spent 20 minutes in the main house. I wasn't snooping exactly. I was verifying what I already suspected. In the master bedroom, I found a locked filing cabinet. Brandon had always been careless with keys, leaving spares in obvious places. I found the right one in his nightstand drawer, second from the bottom, same place he'd kept things since high school. Inside the cabinet, I found financial statements for an account I'd never seen before. Danielle Marie Cooper, the account was titled. Not Harrison. She'd kept her maiden name for banking purposes. The deposits were irregular, but substantial. $300 here, $500 there, sometimes over $1,000, all marked as merchandise sales. I photographed everything with my phone, then locked the cabinet and replaced the key exactly as I'd found it. That evening, Marcus called. "I have your preliminary report," he said. "You free to meet tomorrow?" I met him at a coffee shop in Sundance Square, away from any place Danielle might go. Marcus arrived with a manila folder thick enough to require a rubber band. "Your daughter-in-law has been busy," he said without preamble. He opened the folder and spread out printed pages, bank statements, screenshots, transaction logs. "She's been running this operation for at least 8 months," Marcus continued. 4 different shopping centers, 3 social media accounts under fake names. Total theft value I can document is approximately $53,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $53,000. "The money goes into that personal account you found," Marcus went on. "She's been careful about it. Small deposits, irregular timing, nothing to trigger bank reporting requirements. She knows what she's doing." "What's she spending it on?" I asked. Marcus flipped to another page. Designer accessories. A Louis Vuitton bag, $4,200. Trip to Cancun last winter, $6,800. Jewelry from high-end boutiques. She's also been paying rent on a storage unit under a fake name. I got photos. He showed me pictures of a climate-controlled storage space filled with boxes. Unopened cosmetics, electronics still in packaging, designer clothes with tags attached. She's stockpiling, I said. Looks like it. Either planning a bigger sale or keeping evidence of her lifestyle hidden from your son. I studied the photos, my mind working through implications. What else? Marcus hesitated. There's something you should know about her relationship with your son. He showed me screenshots of text messages between Danielle and someone saved in her contacts as ML. The messages were clinical, businesslike. ML turned out to be Michelle Lawson, a divorce attorney in Arlington. She's been consulting with a divorce lawyer for 3 months, Marcus said quietly. The messages indicate she's planning to leave your son as soon as she secures what she calls the primary asset. The primary asset. My house. I sat back in my chair, processing everything. Danielle wasn't just stealing from stores. She wasn't just manipulating me. She was systematically setting up to destroy my son's life, take everything he thought he had, and disappear with it all. Can you document all of this in a format suitable for law enforcement? I asked. Already done. That's the second copy in the folder. First one's yours. I paid Marcus the remaining balance I owed him and walked out with the folder under my arm. The weight of it felt significant, like I was carrying something more than paper. I was carrying proof, evidence, justice. Back in Patricia's office 2 days later, I presented everything to her. She read through it methodically, her expression growing harder with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me with something like respect. Mr. Harrison, with this evidence, you could have her arrested today. Not yet, I said. First, I want to make sure she can't take anything when she falls. You want to establish the trust? Yes. We spent the next 3 hours working through details. The Harrison Family Heritage Fund would own my house. I would be the trustee with complete control during my lifetime. Upon my death, the property would transfer to Veterans Housing Alliance, a charity that built housing for homeless veterans. Brandon would inherit nothing. Danielle would get even less. The trust is irrevocable, Patricia explained. Once you sign these documents, you cannot change the beneficiary. Even if you wanted to give the house to your son later, you couldn't. I thought about Brandon sitting silently while Danielle planned my liquidation. I thought about 5 years in a garage, 5 years of being called old man, 5 years of watching my son transform into someone I didn't recognize. I understand, I said. Let's do it. The notary arrived at 4 in the afternoon. I signed everything in triplicate, watched Patricia witness and file the documents electronically with the county. By 5 o'clock, the Harrison Family Heritage Fund officially owned my house. That evening, I sat in my garage workshop and opened a beer. The Elgin watch sat on my workbench, fully repaired now, ticking steadily. I picked it up and listened to the precise mechanism, each gear turning exactly as it should. For 43 years, I'd worked on the railroad. I'd learned that timing was everything. A train arriving 1 minute early was as dangerous as one arriving late. Everything had to move according to schedule, each piece coordinating perfectly with every other piece. I had all the pieces now, the house protected, the evidence gathered, the legal framework in place. Now I just needed to wait for the right moment, to put my plan in motion. I took another sip of beer and smiled. Danielle thought she was so clever, planning her future on my corpse. Brandon thought he could stay silent and innocent, claiming ignorance while benefiting from her schemes. They had no idea what was coming, but they would. Very soon, they would. The pressure started building the first week after I established the trust. Danielle became insistent about the house transfer, bringing it up at every opportunity. Over breakfast, during dinner, even when I was just trying to walk through the living room to reach my garage workshop. "Everett, we need to talk about your estate planning," she said one evening, cornering me near the kitchen. Her tone was pleasant, but I could see the calculation behind her smile. "You're not getting any younger. It's important to get these things settled." "I'm 68, not 90, I said mildly. "Exactly. And at 68, you never know what could happen. A fall, a heart attack, a stroke. If something happens to you without proper planning, the estate could be tied up in probate for years. Is that what you want? What I wanted was for her to stop planning my funeral while I was still breathing, but I kept that thought to myself. I'll think about it, I said, which had become my standard response. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You've been saying that for weeks now. These things take time. Time we might not have, she pressed. Brandon is your only child, Everett, your only heir. The house should go to him. You promised it would. I had promised no such thing, but correcting her would only escalate the confrontation, so I nodded vaguely and retreated to my garage, leaving her fuming in the doorway. The next confrontation came over dinner. Danielle had prepared what she called a family meal, which meant Brandon and I were expected to sit at the dining table while she orchestrated the conversation. I've been thinking, Danielle said, serving pasta with excessive care, about the future, Brandon's future, our future as a family. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I cut my pasta and said nothing. You're 68 now, she continued. Isn't it time to think about legacy? About what you're leaving behind? I think about it every day, I said truthfully. I thought about it constantly, in fact, just not the way she imagined. Then you understand why we need to finalize the house transfer. Brandon is your only son. This house should be his. It's only right. I looked at Brandon, who was studying his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. What do you think, son? Do you think the house should be yours? He glanced up, surprised to be addressed directly. Well, I mean, we did talk about it. Years ago. You said... What did I say exactly? I asked. Brandon's mouth opened and closed. You said we could live here. That it would be ours eventually. Eventually? I repeated. That's an interesting word. Could mean anything, really. Danielle's fork clicked against her plate. Don't play word games, Everett. We've been taking care of this house for 5 years. Paying the taxes, the utilities, the maintenance. We've earned it. Earned it. As if living rent-free in a house I owned, spending my pension money on their lifestyle, was some kind of sacrifice on their part. I'll think about it, I said again. Danielle's face flushed. You keep saying that. What exactly are you thinking about? We're family. Brandon is your blood. Who else would you leave it to? I took a deliberate bite of pasta, chewed slowly, and swallowed. I'm exploring my options. The silence that followed was electric. Danielle stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Brandon looked between us nervously. Options? Danielle's voice had gone dangerously quiet. What options? You have one child, one heir. There are no other options. There are always options, I said. Charitable organizations, for instance. Veterans groups, housing nonprofits. Plenty of worthy causes that could use property assets. I watched the color drain from Danielle's face before flooding back in angry red. It was almost worth the coming tirade just to see that expression. You would give your house to strangers instead of your own son? Her voice rose with each word. After everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me? I asked calmly. The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brandon tried to intervene. Dad, come on, don't be like this. Be like what? Honest? I live in a converted garage, Brandon. Your wife calls me old man instead of using my name. I pay for groceries with my pension while you two plan how to spend my estate. What precisely have you done for me? Danielle stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I've put up with your presence in my house for 5 years? That's what I've done. I've cooked your meals, cleaned your messes, dealt with your depressing old man energy, and this is the thanks I get? My house, she'd said. Not our house. Not even Brandon's house. My house. I think I'm done with dinner, I said, standing. Thank you for the meal. I left them sitting there and returned to my garage. Through the thin walls, I could hear Danielle's voice rising and falling, Brandon's occasional attempts at placating her. I smiled and went back to work on a pocket watch from 1897, its mechanism delicate and precise. 2 weeks later, I left some old documents where Danielle would find them. Not the real trust documents, of course. Those were safely filed with Patricia and locked in a bank safety deposit box. No, these were old estate planning drafts from years ago, worthless papers I'd kept for exactly this purpose. I made sure to leave them in a folder labeled Living Will in my nightstand drawer, which I conveniently left slightly open while running an errand. When I returned 3 hours later, the drawer was fully closed. The folder had been moved, just slightly. Danielle had taken the bait. That evening she was in an unusually good mood, humming while she cooked, smiling at Brandon, even civil to me. I knew she'd taken the documents to show someone, probably that unlicensed paralegal Marcus had mentioned in his report, some friend of a friend who pretended to know law. The following evening, Danielle was downright cheerful. "Everett," she said sweetly over dinner, "I've been thinking about our conversation. I was too harsh. You're right to take your time with these decisions." "Is that so?" I said. "Absolutely. Estate planning is complex. You should do whatever feels right to you." She smiled warmly. "We're family. That's what matters." Brandon looked relieved at this change in tone. I nodded and said nothing, watching Danielle's performance with interest. She thought she'd found something useful in those old papers. She thought she knew my plans now. She had no idea. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his surveillance. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, Danielle made her rounds. He documented everything: the stores she hit, the items she stole, the online accounts where she sold them. The evidence folder grew thicker each week. At the end of the month, Marcus delivered his final comprehensive report: 147 pages of documentation, photographs, transaction logs, bank statements, social media screenshots, everything organized, indexed, ready for law enforcement. "This is bulletproof," Marcus said, handing over the bound report. "Any prosecutor would salivate over evidence this clean." I paid him the final balance and secured the report in my safety deposit box, right next to the trust documents and my wife's wedding ring. Everything was in place. The house was protected. The evidence was gathered. All I needed now was the right moment to spring the trap. That moment would come soon enough. I could feel it. The opportunity arrived in early May during a dinner that Danielle had made unusually elaborate. Steaks, roasted vegetables, wine. She was being particularly attentive, making sure my glass stayed full, asking about my day. I knew this performance. She wanted something. "Everett," she said as we finished eating, "I ran into an old friend of mine the other day. She's a financial planner. Very successful. We got talking about estate planning strategies." "Did you now?" I said. "Yes, and she mentioned something interesting. A way to transfer property to heirs while avoiding estate taxes. Have you heard of living trusts?" I had to admire the approach. Pretending to bring me new information about something I'd already done. "Can't say I have," I lied smoothly. Danielle leaned forward, animated. "It's brilliant. You transfer the property into a trust now, which saves massive amounts in taxes later. Your heirs get everything without the government taking a huge cut. It's completely legal, very common for estate planning." "Sounds complicated," I said. "That's what lawyers are for. But think about it, Everett. Brandon could inherit the house without losing 30 or 40% to taxes. Isn't that what you want? To leave him everything?" I pretended to consider this. "It does sound interesting, though I'd want to understand all the details first." Of course. But maybe it's worth exploring? I could give you my friend's contact information." "Actually," I said slowly, "I was just talking to someone about financial planning recently. An old friend from my railroad days. He mentioned something similar." Danielle's eyes lit up. "Really? What did he say?" "Something about trust structures for tax efficiency. I didn't quite follow all of it, but he seemed to think it was a good idea for someone my age." "You should definitely look into it," Danielle said eagerly. "This could be the perfect solution. You could set up the trust, name Brandon as the beneficiary, and everything would be handled smoothly when the time comes." "I suppose I could talk to a lawyer about it," I said. "See what they recommend." "That's a wonderful idea." Danielle's smile could have powered the entire house. "The sooner the better, really. These things take time to set up properly." Over the next week, I played my part carefully. I mentioned casually that I had an appointment with an estate attorney, that I was seriously considering the trust option, that it made a lot of sense for tax purposes. Danielle responded to each mention with enthusiasm bordering on glee. She'd started shopping more, I noticed. New clothes appearing in her closet, She'd mentioned wanting to take a vacation, maybe to Europe, planning her spending spree before the money was even accessible. Then came the evening I'd been building toward. I gathered them both in the living room, folder in hand, expression serious. I wanted to update you both on the estate planning situation, I said. Danielle sat forward immediately. Brandon looked nervous but attentive. I met with my attorney yesterday. We went over everything in detail. I paused for effect. I've decided to move forward with the living trust structure. Danielle's face transformed. Pure, undisguised joy. Everett, that's wonderful. That's such a smart decision. The house will be transferred into the Harrison Family Heritage Trust, I continued. All the paperwork has been filed and notarized. As of yesterday afternoon, the trust officially owns this property. And Brandon is the beneficiary? Danielle asked, barely able to contain herself. I looked at my son, who was staring at me with a mixture of hope and guilt. Brandon will benefit from the arrangement, yes. Everything has been structured to avoid probate and minimize tax liability. It wasn't technically a lie. Brandon would benefit from learning this lesson, even if not the way he expected. Danielle actually clapped her hands together. This is such good news. Brandon, did you hear? Your father has really thought about the future. Thanks, Dad, Brandon said quietly. I know this wasn't easy for you. No, I agreed. It wasn't easy at all. That evening, Danielle made a show of being extra kind to me, offered to make me tea, asked if I needed anything from the store, thanked me repeatedly for doing the right thing. I smiled and accepted her gratitude, knowing that in a few weeks that smile would crack and shatter like dropped glass. But I wasn't done setting the stage yet. The next week, I reached out to Gerald Miller, the security guard who'd first shown me the surveillance footage. He'd stayed in touch, checking in occasionally to see if I was okay. Gerald, I said when we met for coffee, remember you mentioned you knew some people in the Fort Worth Police Department? I do. Worked with a lot of them during my time in Dallas. Good people. Why? I need to speak with someone in their financial crimes division. Someone who handles organized retail theft cases. Gerald's expression sharpened. You're ready to move forward? I'm ready. He made some calls. 2 days later, I found myself in a small conference room at the West Division Police Station, sitting across from Detective Jonathan Grace. Detective Grace was in his mid-40s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much human stupidity. He reviewed the evidence Marcus had compiled with increasing interest, occasionally making notes. Mr. Harrison, he said finally, this is some of the most comprehensive documentation I've seen in a retail theft case. Your investigator did excellent work. So you can prosecute? I asked. We can definitely investigate. And based on what I'm seeing here, yes, prosecution is very likely. He flipped through pages of surveillance footage stills. In Texas, organized retail theft over $50,000 is a state jail felony. We're looking at up to 2 years imprisonment, significant fines, and restitution. How long before you can make an arrest? We'll need to verify some of this independently, cross-reference with store records, build our own case file. Figure 6 to 8 weeks for the investigation, then we'll seek an arrest warrant. He looked up at me. Are you prepared for what comes next? This will be messy. Family situations always are. I'm prepared, I said. We shook hands, and I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in years. The trap was set. The evidence was in law enforcement hands. The timeline was established. Now all I had to do was wait. At home, Danielle was planning. I'd catch her looking at real estate listings online, browsing luxury vacation packages, shopping for furniture. She'd started treating me better, almost deferentially. After all, I was the man who just handed her the keys to financial freedom, or so she thought. I worked on my pocket watches and counted down the days. Detective Grace called with updates. The investigation was proceeding, stores were cooperating, evidence was being verified. Everything was moving forward exactly as it should. 6 weeks after my meeting with Detective Grace, he called with the news I'd been waiting for. We have the warrant, Mr. Harrison. We'll execute it next Tuesday afternoon. Are you going to be home? I'll be here, I said. Tuesday afternoon. I marked it on my mental calendar, though I'd never forget the date. The day Justice finally caught up with Danielle. The day her face would turn white as a ghost, just like the title of this chapter of my life promised. I could hardly wait. Tuesday arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-80s. A beautiful summer day in Fort Worth. I spent the morning in my garage workshop, working on an Elgin pocket watch from 1924. The mechanism was intricate, requiring my full attention, but my mind kept drifting to the clock on the wall. Detective Grace had said they'd arrive around 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd positioned myself perfectly. From my garage, I could see the street through the small window. I could hear everything that happened in the house through the thin walls. At 2:20, I heard Danielle's voice in the living room, talking on her phone about furniture shopping. Brandon was in the kitchen making lunch, a normal Tuesday afternoon in their world. At 2:28, I heard the sirens. 3 police cruisers pulled up to the house, lights flashing. I set down my tools carefully and walked to the garage door, opening it just enough to see out. Detective Grace emerged from the first car, followed by 4 uniformed officers. They moved with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. I stepped out of the garage, staying near the entrance, watching. The front door was unlocked. They walked right in. From inside the house, I heard Danielle's voice rise in confusion. "What is this? What's happening?" I moved closer, standing in the driveway now, a perfect view through the open front door. Danielle stood in the living room, her phone still in her hand, face frozen in shock. She looked from one officer to the next, her brain clearly struggling to process what was happening. "Danielle Cooper Harrison?" Detective Grace's voice was formal, professional. "Yes?" It came out as a whisper. "You're under arrest for organized retail theft exceeding $53,000, fraudulent use of a credit card, and wire fraud." He began reading her Miranda rights, while one of the officers produced handcuffs. The color drained from Danielle's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered on the floor. Brandon came running from the kitchen. "What's going on? This has to be a mistake." "Everett!" Danielle's voice finally found itself, rising to a shriek. Tell them this is crazy." I stepped into the doorway, calm as I'd ever been. Our eyes met across the room. "Tell them what, Danielle?" I asked quietly. "That I didn't do anything. That card is yours. You bought those things. He stole them, officers, not me." Her desperation was almost beautiful to watch. The perfectly composed woman who'd called me old man for years was falling apart in real time. Detective Grace looked at her with the patient expression of someone who'd heard every excuse. "Mrs. Harrison, we have 47 separate video recordings of you shoplifting from 4 different retail locations. We have 8 months of bank statements showing deposits from selling stolen merchandise. We have testimony from 3 witnesses, including store security personnel and your own father-in-law." That last word hung in the air like a bomb. Danielle's head whipped toward me. "You?" The word was barely human, more like an animal's cry of pain. "You did this?" "I restored justice," I said simply. "Something I should have done months ago when I first found out." The officer stepped forward with the handcuffs. Danielle tried to pull away, but there was nowhere to go. The metal clicked around her wrists, and something in her seemed to break. "You miserable old man!" she screamed. The mask was completely off now, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "I gave up 5 years of my life taking care of you. 5 years. Taking care of me?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You put me in a garage, Danielle. You stole my money. You used my credit card to commit crimes. That's not taking care of someone." "Brandon," she turned to my son, who stood frozen near the kitchen doorway. "Call our lawyer. Call him right now." Brandon looked between us, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. "Dad, what's happening? What did she do?" "Ask her about the storage unit," I said. "Ask her about the Facebook Marketplace accounts. Ask her about the $53,000 she stole and sold." "I didn't," Danielle started, but Detective Grace cut her off. "Save it for your lawyer, Mrs. Harrison. We need to go." They started leading her toward the door. She fought every step, screaming, crying, demanding they call her lawyer. As they reached the doorway, she turned back one last time. "Fine," she spat. "I'll call my lawyer, and when this is cleared up, we're going to sue you for everything. And then we're going to throw you out of our house, you worthless old man." Our house. Even now, even in handcuffs being led to a police car, She believed the house was hers. The moment had arrived. I'd been waiting weeks for this, and I wasn't going to rush it. I let them take another step. Let her think she'd gotten the last word. Let Brandon stand there, still confused, still not understanding the full scope of what was happening. Then very quietly, I spoke. "Your house, Danielle?" She stopped, turned. Her eyes were wild, mascara running down her cheeks. But there was still that spark of defiance. "Brandon," I said, looking at my son, "show her the house documents. Go ahead. Show her who owns this property." Brandon's face went pale. "Dad, you don't have them, do you?" I said. "Because you never filed the transfer papers? The house was always mine legally. You were just living here with my permission." I could see the moment the implication hit Danielle. Her eyes went even wider, if that was possible. "Was," I emphasized, "past tense, because 3 months ago I transferred this house into an irrevocable living trust, the Harrison Family Heritage Fund. I'm the trustee, and when I die, it goes to the Veterans Housing Alliance charity." The silence was absolute. Even the police officers had stopped moving, watching this family drama unfold. "You're lying," Danielle whispered. I pulled a folder from my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for days, waiting for exactly this moment. I held it up so everyone could see. Legal documents, filed with the county, notarized, completely legitimate and completely irrevocable. I opened the folder, showing the official seals. "The trust owns this house now, not me, not Brandon, not you, never you." "You can't do that," Brandon said, his voice breaking. "Dad, you can't." "I already did, 3 months ago, while Danielle was busy planning how to spend her inheritance." I pulled out another paper from the folder. "This is a notice of eviction. Both of you have 30 days to find new housing. As the trustee of the Harrison Family Heritage Fund, I'm exercising my right to determine who resides in trust property, and I've determined that you two no longer do." Danielle made a sound I'd never heard a human make before, a kind of keening wail that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She lunged toward me, but the officers held her back. "You miserable, vindictive old bastard!" She was shrieking now, all pretense of composure gone. "I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. I'll prove you're senile, incompetent. I'll have you declared mentally unfit." "Good luck with that," I said calmly. "My attorney will be happy to provide documentation of my complete mental competence, along with a countersuit for defamation." They dragged her toward the police car, but her voice carried back, screaming threats and obscenities until the car door slammed shut. Brandon stood in the middle of the living room, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Dad," he said quietly, "what have you done?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who'd stood by silently while his wife destroyed me piece by piece. "I did what you should have done years ago, Brandon. I stood up for myself." The police cars pulled away, sirens wailing. Neighbors were gathering on their lawns, watching, whispering. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them all see. Justice had been served. That evening my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Mr. Harrison?" A woman's voice, professional and cold. "This is Rebecca Thornton from Thornton and Associates. I represent Danielle Harrison. We need to discuss your actions today." "Do we?" I said pleasantly. "My client has been illegally detained. The charges against her are baseless, and we'll be filing a motion to dismiss immediately. But more importantly, Mr. Harrison, we'll be filing a civil suit against you for defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to commit false arrest." I'd been expecting this. Danielle was many things, but she wasn't stupid enough to go down without fighting. "Interesting theory," I said. "You might want to review the evidence package the police have before you commit to that strategy. 47 videos, 8 months of financial records, witness testimony. It's quite comprehensive. We'll see about that. In the meantime, I need to inform you that any attempt to evict Mrs. Harrison from her residence will be met with immediate legal action. That house is her marital home, and she has rights." "Her marital home?" I laughed. "Counselor, I think you need to review the property records. The house belongs to the Harrison Family Heritage Fund, a legal trust. Mrs. Harrison has no ownership interest, and as a trustee, I have the legal right to determine occupancy." There was a pause. I could hear papers rustling. We'll be challenging the validity of that trust, she said finally. Our position is that you created it under duress, or while mentally incompetent. Good luck proving that. The trust was created with full legal counsel, notarized and filed properly. My attorney, Patricia Stewart, will be happy to testify to my complete mental competence throughout the process. More silence. Then, you're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Harrison. No, counselor. I already won. Your client is facing state jail, time for organized retail theft. The house is legally protected. Your threats are just noise. I hung up before she could respond. An hour later, Patricia called me. I just got a very aggressive letter from Danielle's attorney, she said. They're threatening everything short of nuclear war. Can they do anything? Not really. The trust is airtight. I made sure of that. They might file nuisance suits, but they won't win. And honestly, given that Danielle is facing criminal charges, no judge is going to be very sympathetic to her claims. What about the eviction? That's solid too. You're the trustee. The house belongs to the trust, and you have every right to determine who lives there. They can fight it, but they'll lose. 30 days is more than generous. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Detective Grace. How's our guest? I asked. Posted bail an hour ago. $25,000. Her mother put up the money. Fast work. She's got a good lawyer, I'll give her that. But Mr. Harrison, the evidence is overwhelming. She's going down for this. It's just a matter of how hard she wants to make it on herself. Keep me updated, I said. The next morning I woke to find Brandon sitting on the steps outside my garage. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his clothes rumpled. Can we talk? He asked. I gestured for him to come inside. He sat on my workbench stool while I made coffee. I didn't know, he said finally, about the stealing. I swear, Dad, I didn't know. Didn't know or didn't want to know? I asked. He flinched. I don't know. She always had money. I assumed it was from her job or side hustles or... I don't know. I didn't ask questions. You didn't ask questions when she put me in a garage either, or when she took control of my bank account, or when she called me old man at every opportunity. I know, his voice cracked. I know, and I'm sorry. She's so strong, Dad. So confident. When I'm around her, I feel like I can't think straight. That's called manipulation, son. He put his head in his hands. What am I supposed to do now? She's facing prison time. We're being evicted. I don't even know who she is anymore. I sat down across from him. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to be the father who fixed everything. But another part of me, the part that had lived in a garage for 5 years, stayed quiet. You're going to figure that out yourself, I said finally. I can't do it for you. But the house is gone, Brandon. It was never yours, and now it never will be. That's the consequence of standing by while someone treats your father like garbage. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix 5 years of humiliation. Sorry doesn't give me back my dignity. He left a few minutes later, shoulders slumped, defeated. I watched him walk into the main house, probably to pack. 3 days later, Danielle tried to come back to the house. I'd changed the locks, legal and proper. She stood on the porch, screaming, pounding on the door. I called the police. They arrived within minutes. Sir, this is my house, she shouted at the officers. He can't just lock me out. Ma'am, one of the officers said patiently, according to the property records and the eviction notice you were served, you have 30 days to vacate. Attempting to break in is trespassing. This is my house. They escorted her off the property. She left screaming threats about lawyers and lawsuits and revenge. I watched from the window, sipping coffee, feeling nothing but calm satisfaction. That weekend I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a printout of text messages between Danielle and her divorce attorney, the ones Marcus had documented months ago. Someone had mailed them to me anonymously, but stapled to the front was a note in Brandon's handwriting. I found these in her things. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I read through them. Plans to divorce Brandon immediately after inheriting. Discussions about hiding assets. Calculations of how much she could get in a settlement. My son had been nothing more than a stepping stone to her. Another mark, another victim. I called Brandon. I got your package. Yeah. His voice was hollow. "I've been going through her stuff. There's more. So much more. She was never going to stay with me, was she?" "No, son, she wasn't. I'm such an idiot." "You were in love. That makes people blind." There was a long pause. "Can you ever forgive me, Dad?" I thought about that question, about 5 years in a garage, about being called old man, about watching my son transform into a stranger. "Maybe," I said finally, "but not today. Today you need to move out and start building a life that's actually yours. Not hers. Yours." "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The eviction deadline was approaching. In exactly 30 days, they'd both be gone, and I'd have my house back. My real house, not a converted garage. And Danielle? Danielle had a court date in 6 weeks. I couldn't wait to see what color her face turned when the judge read the verdict. The chaos that followed Danielle's arrest was more satisfying than I'd imagined. 3 days after she posted bail, she showed up at the house with a locksmith, fully expecting to just walk back in. I'd changed the locks the morning after her arrest, completely legal, since she was no longer a resident, according to the eviction notice that had been properly served. I watched from the garage window as she argued with the locksmith, gesturing wildly at the front door. He kept shaking his head, pointing to his paperwork. She couldn't prove she lived there. No lease, no deed, nothing with her name on it. Finally, she called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. "This is my house," she screamed at them. "He illegally locked me out." The older officer, a patient-looking woman with gray streaks in her hair, reviewed the eviction notice I provided. She looked at the trust documents. She checked the property records on her tablet. "Ma'am," she said finally, "according to all legal documentation, this property belongs to the Harrison Family Heritage Fund. Mr. Harrison is the trustee and has the legal right to determine residency. You were served proper eviction notice with a 30-day timeline." "But I live here. My things are in there." "You have until the deadline to retrieve your belongings. Breaking and entering before that time would be trespassing." The officer's tone was professional, but firm. "I suggest you coordinate with Mr. Harrison to collect your items." Danielle's face went through several shades of red before settling on a blotchy purple. She looked at me with pure hatred. "Fine," she spat. "I'll get my things, and then my lawyer will destroy you." "Your lawyer's welcome to try," I said calmly. "Patricia will be waiting." She left in her mother's car, and I went back to my workshop, smiling. A week later, there was a court hearing about the temporary housing situation. Danielle's attorney had filed an emergency motion claiming I was illegally evicting her from her marital home. The judge, a stern-looking man in his 60s, listened to both sides. Patricia presented the trust documents, the property records, and the eviction notice. She systematically dismantled every argument Danielle's lawyer made. "Your Honor," the lawyer tried, "Mrs. Harrison has lived in this house for 5 years. It's her primary residence. Mr. Harrison created this trust under suspicious circumstances, possibly while mentally incompetent or under duress." "Do you have any evidence of mental incompetence or duress?" the judge asked. "We're preparing expert testimony." "That's not what I asked. Do you have evidence now?" The lawyer stammered. "Not at this moment, but—" "Then this motion is premature?" The judge looked at the eviction notice. Mr. Harrison provided proper 30-day notice. The property legally belongs to a trust of which he is the trustee. Mrs. Harrison, you and your husband have until the deadline to find alternative housing. Motion denied. Danielle stood up, knocking over her chair. "This is ridiculous. He's doing this because I'm facing criminal charges. He's trying to—" "Mrs. Harrison," the judge cut her off, "I suggest you sit down and remain quiet unless you want to be held in contempt." She sat, but her whole body vibrated with rage. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. After the hearing, Brandon approached me in the hallway. His eyes were red-rimmed, his suit wrinkled. "Dad, can we talk?" We found a quiet corner. I waited. "I didn't know," he said, "about the stealing. I swear to you, I didn't know." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots Marcus had given me. Text messages between Danielle and her divorce lawyer, plans to leave him, calculations of how much she could extract in a settlement, discussion of the old man's assets, as if I were already dead. Brandon read through them, his face growing paler with each message. When he finished, he just stood there, staring at nothing. "She was going to leave me," he said softly. "As soon as you died? Take everything and leave." "Yes," I said. "I was just a means to an end." "Yes." He looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw my son. Not the man who'd let his wife put me in a garage, but the boy who used to wait for me by the window. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I was weak. I let her manipulate me. I let her treat you like garbage, and I just stood there." "Yes, you did. Can you ever forgive me?" I thought about that question carefully. Maybe someday. But Brandon, forgiveness isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn. And right now, you need to focus on building a life that's actually yours. He nodded slowly. "I found a studio apartment, $1,100 a month. It's small, but it's mine." He paused. "Danielle and I are done. I'm filing for divorce." "Good." Her lawyer offered her a plea deal, 3 years probation and restitution. But she turned it down. She thinks she can win at trial. I smiled slightly. "How's that working out for her?" "Not well. Marcus found more evidence. She had a storage unit full of stolen goods. Designer bags, jewelry, electronics. The police seized everything." 2 weeks before the eviction deadline, I got a call from Detective Grace. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "We found the storage unit your investigator documented. $4,200 in luxury handbags. $6,800 in jewelry. Electronics. Designer clothes. All of it stolen. Everything's been seized as evidence. Will it strengthen the case? It makes it airtight. Her lawyer tried to get a better plea deal after we found it. Prosecution offered 18 months with time served and full restitution. She still refused." "She thinks she'll win," I said. "She's delusional. We have video, financial records, witness testimony, and now physical evidence. The trial is a formality." The trial date was set for early September. The eviction deadline came first. On the final day, I watched from my garage as Brandon loaded boxes into a U-Haul. He'd found a studio apartment in Arlington, a modest place he could actually afford on his salary. Danielle wasn't there. She'd moved in with her mother the week before, refusing to speak to Brandon or acknowledge the eviction was happening. When Brandon finished loading, he stood in the driveway for a long moment, looking at the house. "Goodbye, Dad," he said quietly. I'll call you sometime, if that's okay." "It's okay," I said. "But Brandon, don't call asking for money or favors. Call when you're ready to rebuild trust, not before." He nodded and drove away. For the first time in 5 years, the house was mine again. Truly mine. I stood in the living room that evening, looking at the empty spaces where Danielle's furniture had been. The walls were still that sterile gray she'd chosen, but I could change that. I could change everything. Tomorrow, I'd start converting the garage back into a garage. I'd move into the master bedroom. I'd hang my photographs back on the walls. Tomorrow, I'd start living in my house again. But tonight, I just stood there and smiled. The trial happened on a warm September morning. I sat in the gallery, watching as they brought Danielle in. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. The confident, polished woman who'd terrorized me for 5 years looked diminished, almost fragile. Almost. Then she saw me, and her expression hardened. Pure hatred flickered across her face before her lawyer whispered something and she forced it into neutrality. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Video after video of Danielle stealing. Bank statements showing the deposits. Testimony from store managers. The storage unit inventory. Each luxury item carefully cataloged. Danielle's lawyer tried. He really did. He argued about video quality, questioned witness credibility, suggested the whole thing was a setup by a vindictive father-in-law. But there was too much evidence. Far too much. When it was Danielle's turn to testify, she stuck to her story. She'd bought everything legally. The videos were misleading or doctored. I was the real criminal, using my position to frame her. The prosecutor asked one simple question during cross-examination. "Mrs. Harrison, if you purchased all these items legally, where are the receipts?" Danielle's mouth opened and closed. They were lost. In the move. All of them? For $53,000 worth of merchandise? Every single receipt? Yes. How convenient. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, the four women stood and read the verdict. In the case of the state of Texas versus Danielle Cooper Harrison, on the charge of organized retail theft, a state jail felony, we find the defendant guilty. Danielle's face went white. Not the blotchy red of anger, not the flush of embarrassment, pure bloodless white. She swayed in her seat, and her lawyer had to steady her. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Danielle was released on her existing bail, but she looked like a ghost walking out of that courtroom. All the fight had drained out of her. Brandon sat 2 rows behind me. He'd come alone. When the verdict was read, he put his head in his hands and wept quietly. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was thorough. Mrs. Harrison, you have been convicted of organized retail theft, a serious crime that shows planning, intent, and complete disregard for the law. You stole not because you were desperate, but because you wanted luxuries you hadn't earned. You used your father-in-law's identity to facilitate these crimes, putting an innocent man at risk of prosecution. He paused, looking at Danielle over his reading glasses. This court sentences you to 18 months in state jail, followed by 5 years of probation. You will pay full restitution of $53,000 to the affected retailers. You will complete 200 hours of community service. Do you understand this sentence? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was barely a whisper. Take her into custody. The bailiff handcuffed her. As they led her away, Danielle looked back at Brandon one last time. He didn't meet her eyes. In the hallway afterward, Brandon found me. His face was tear-stained, his shoulders slumped. Dad, he said, I'm so sorry. For everything. For all of it. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He'd lost weight, too. His suit was cheaper than the ones Danielle used to buy him. He looked tired, beaten down, but also somehow lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Brandon, I said carefully, I love you. I always will. You're my son, and nothing changes that. His face brightened hopefully. But, I continued, trust is like a pocket watch. If you break it, you can repair it. You can get it working again, but it will never keep time quite the same way. It's been damaged, and that damage is permanent. He nodded slowly. I understand. You need to build your own life now. Not the life Danielle wanted. Not even the life I wanted for you. Your life. And you need to do it without my money or my help. Not because I'm punishing you, but because you need to learn to stand on your own. I will, he said. I'm already starting. I got a promotion at work. Small raise, but it helps. And I'm seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I let things get so bad. That's good, I said. Keep doing that. Can we maybe have dinner sometime? Not now, I know. But eventually. Eventually, I agreed. When you're ready, when we're both ready. He left, and I walked out into the September sunshine feeling lighter than I had in years. The house renovation took 3 weeks. I hired contractors to convert the garage back to its original purpose. I moved into the master bedroom, the room Danielle had claimed as her own for 5 years. I repainted everything, removing every trace of her sterile gray aesthetic. I hung my photographs back on the walls. My wife's picture went on the mantel, right where it belonged. My collection of restored pocket watches found a new home in a custom display case in the bedroom. In October, I did something I'd been planning since the day the trust was finalized. I called Patricia Stewart. I want to make a donation, I said, to the Veterans Housing Alliance. $50,000. That's very generous, Everett. They'll get the house eventually. Might as well help them now while I can see the good it does. The check was written, the donation made. The money that would have gone to Danielle's luxury bags and beach vacations instead went to building homes for veterans who had nowhere to go. That felt right. That felt like justice. In late October, I booked a flight to Switzerland. I'd always wanted to see the watch factories there, the master craftsmen who created timepieces with precision and care. It was a trip I'd planned to take with my wife before cancer took her from me. Now I'd go alone, but that was okay. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. The week before I left, Brandon called. Dad, can I take you to dinner? Nothing fancy, just dinner. We met at a small diner near my house. Brandon looked better, still thin, still tired, but more centered somehow. I wanted to update you, he said. The divorce is final. I signed the papers yesterday. How do you feel? Relieved, sad, angry, all of it. He smiled weakly, but mostly relieved. That's natural. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about building my own life. I realized I don't even know who I am without someone telling me what to want. You'll figure it out, I said. You're stronger than you think. I hope so. He paused. Thank you, Dad, for stopping me, for stopping both of us. If you hadn't, I don't even want to think about where we'd be. You'd have woken up eventually, I said. Just would have cost you more. We ate quietly for a while. Then Brandon asked, Can we do this again? Next month, maybe? Next month, I agreed. I'll be back from Switzerland by then. Switzerland? Going to see the watch factories. It's something your mother and I plan to do together. She would have loved that, he said softly. Yes, she would have. When I got home that night, I sat in my master bedroom, in my house, surrounded by my belongings, and looked at the Elgin pocket watch I'd been repairing when this all started. It was complete now, ticking steadily, keeping perfect time. I thought about the journey from that day in the Krauger parking lot to this moment, from victim to victor, from helpless to powerful, from living in a garage to reclaiming my home. Justice had been served. Danielle was in jail paying for her crimes. Brandon was learning to stand on his own. The house was protected, destined to help veterans in need. And me? I was free. I held the watch up to my ear, listening to its precise mechanism, every gear turning exactly as it should, every spring tensioned perfectly, time moving forward second by second, inexorable and exact. I set the watch in its display case and looked around my bedroom, my house, my life, my future. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was Everett Harrison, 68 years old, retired railroad engineer, watch restoration enthusiast, and the man who'd reclaimed everything that was rightfully his. Justice had been restored, the clock had been repaired, and time, at last, was on my side. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.